There is a scene in Season 3 of Family Guy where Brian Griffin comes home after his first day working as a police drug sniffer and sits down at the dinner table completely out of his mind on cocaine. He does not announce this. He simply starts talking too fast, his sentences colliding with each other and spilling past the edges of any normal conversation, while the family watches him with the expression of people who have not yet named what they are looking at, but already understand something is wrong. The show plays it for laughs. It is funny. And underneath the funny, it is one of the most accurate portraits of early addiction that a cartoon has ever managed to put on screen. Family Guy has been doing this for 20 years, hiding true things inside jokes, telling honest stories about substances and dependency, and then cutting away before the weight fully lands. Most people assume the show treats addiction as a punchline. What follows is going to prove that it does not. The first section is about the drunken clam as sacred space, and about Peter Griffin's alcoholism as identity. There is a bar in Quahog, Rhode Island, called the Drunken Clam. Peter Griffin has been going there since the first season of Family Guy. He goes after work. He goes when something bad happens. He goes when something good happens. He goes when nothing happens at all. The bar is as much a part of his daily life as his house on Spooner Street. Maybe more, because at the Drunken Clam, Peter is never the problem. He is the point. Most shows featuring a character who drinks too much eventually build an episode around what that drinking costs him. Family Guy has done that. It has done it more than once. But before any of that, it is worth sitting with something the show established quietly and early and never seriously walked back. Peter Griffin without alcohol is not a better version of Peter Griffin. He is a worse one. The show decided this in Season 9 and has never meaningfully argued against it since. That is not a throwaway joke, that is a worldview. To understand what Family Guy actually believes about Peter and drinking, you have to look at the one episode that tried hardest to answer the question directly. Season 9, Episode 10, called Friends of Peter G., aired on February 13, 2011. It was written by Brian Scully and directed by John Holmquist. In the episode, Peter and Brian get drunk and cause a disturbance at a movie theater. A judge sentences them both to 30 days of Alcoholics Anonymous. They go. They hate it. They secretly bring cases of beer to the next meeting and get every recovering alcoholic in the room drinking again. Joe shows up to investigate a noise complaint. The group disguises the community center as a church and performs a musical number called Mr. Booze to trick him into leaving. Then, Peter drives home drunk and crashes into a tree. He dies on impact. Death arrives, which is how Family Guy handles moments too heavy to play completely straight. Death gives Peter a second chance, but only after showing him two possible futures. In the first, Peter continues drinking the way he has been drinking. He becomes abusive. He torments his family. He has an affair with his boss, Angela. His home is filthy. His family lives in fear of him. The show plays all of this as genuinely dark. There is no joke cushioning the sequence. Then Peter asks to see what his life would look like if he had never touched alcohol at all. Death shows him that version too. Sober. Peter has a different voice, lighter and more careful. He drinks milk. He spends time with different people at the Drunken Clam, quiet and responsible men that Peter does not recognize, because in this version, he never bonded with Joe or Quagmire the way he did in real life. He looks at the actual Joe and Quagmire, loud and reckless and genuinely fond of him, and finds them uncouth. He has become someone who would not survive in his own neighborhood. Peter hates both versions. Death tells him the answer is moderation. Drink some, not all of it. Peter agrees. He is brought back to life. From that point on, every time he buys a six-pack, he throws 3 cans in the trash. The episode ends at a landfill where seagulls drink the discarded beer and get drunk. The show cannot stop itself from making the seagulls funny, but the point was already made. Sober Peter does not know his closest friends. He does not recognize the people who matter most to him. The version of Peter that exists in the actual show, the one the audience has been watching for 9 seasons, only exists because of beer. That is the show's honest answer to its own question about his drinking. It is not that drinking is fine. It is that for this specific man, alcohol is not separable from the relationships that give his life its shape. That is a more complicated position than most animated shows would touch. Now pull back and look at the full picture of Peter's relationship with the drunken clam across the show's entire run. The bar is where he processes everything. When something confuses him, he takes it to the clam. When something hurts him, the clam is where he lands. His friendship with Quagmire, Cleveland, and Joe exists almost entirely within those walls. The bar is not where Peter goes to drink. The bar is where Peter goes to be a person. Season 14, Episode 14, Underage Peter, which aired on February 21, 2016, makes this explicit in a way the show rarely does. Mayor West raises the drinking age to 50 after Peter floods the local library by challenging himself to drink directly from a fire hydrant. Peter and his friends are suddenly legally barred from the one place that centers their lives. They try to leave town to drink. It does not work. They try to find other solutions. Nothing fits. Eventually, they discover that Brian, because of dog years, counts as old enough to buy alcohol, and they make him their supplier. The episode spends its entire running time treating access to alcohol as something Peter is genuinely owed, not because he needs it to function, but because the law taking away his ability to drink is the law taking away something essential to who he is. In the end, Peter overturns the law. The drinking age goes back down. The story resolves as a win for Peter. That framing is worth pausing on. The show positions the reinstatement of Peter's ability to drink freely as a victory. His friends celebrate. The normal order is restored. Nobody in the episode, not the writers, not the other characters, not the show itself, treats the return to heavy drinking as anything other than the correct outcome. Compare that to what the show does in Season 23. In an episode called Fahrenheit 451, Peter and his friends give up drinking entirely after blacking out hard enough to accidentally marry each other on consecutive nights. For a stretch of the episode, Peter is sober, and the show plays his sobriety as a problem. His family is reportedly relieved when he starts drinking again, because the sober version of Peter is too cheerful, too strange, too difficult to be around. This is the show, 14 seasons after Friends of Peter G., reversing its own position. Friends of Peter G. argued that moderation was possible and desirable. Fahrenheit 451 argues that Peter without alcohol is so uncomfortable for everyone around him that his family prefers the alcoholic version. The moral framework built in 2011 is quietly abandoned in 2025, and nobody in the show acknowledges that the shift happened. The reset is not an accident. It is how long-running animated shows survive. Every season has to be able to do something with Peter's drinking, which means the drinking can never actually change. He cannot become genuinely sober because a sober Peter is, by the show's own established logic, a different person. He cannot become a fully destructive drunk because that closes off too many stories. He has to stay exactly where he is, drinking too much, occasionally confronting it, never sustaining any position long enough for it to cost him anything permanent. Horace, the bartender at the Drunken Clam, keeps a poster of Peter on the wall. The poster includes a quote under Peter's face. The quote says, "He is the person most likely to get drunk." This is presented as an honor. Peter's response to seeing it is not embarrassment. It is pride. The bar recognizes him for the one thing he does there most consistently, and he accepts that recognition as a legitimate form of belonging. That detail does something specific. It moves Peter's drinking out of the category of habit and into the category of identity. He is not a man who drinks too much. He is a man whose place in his community is partly defined by how much he drinks. The drunken clam does not just tolerate his drinking, it celebrates it. Most addiction stories are about a person who loses something because of what they use. Peter's story is built on the opposite premise. He gained almost everything because of what he drinks. His friendships, his social confidence, his ability to be funny and loose and present in a way that sober Peter, the milk-drinking stranger death showed him, never could be. The show does not ask you to admire this, but it does not ask you to condemn it either. It presents it, season after season, as simply the way things are in Quahog. And the show is not blind to the cost. It has depicted drunk Peter causing car accidents, flooding public buildings, destroying property, putting his family in danger. Friends of Peter G. showed his worst possible future with total seriousness. The show knows what heavy drinking does. It just keeps deciding, season after season, that the answer is not to change Peter. The answer is to change the episode and come back next week. Peter Griffin is the Drunken Clam's most loyal customer because the Drunken Clam is the place where Peter Griffin most fully exists. Take away the bar, and you get the milk drinking. Stranger death showed him. Keep the bar, and you get Peter, messy and dangerous and ridiculous, but also the only Peter anyone in Quahog has ever actually known. The show decided a long time ago which version it preferred. What it never decided is why it prefers it. And that question follows every other addiction story the show has ever told, starting with the one that came first. The second section covers the season 3 episode called The Thin White Line, and Brian's cocaine addiction, and the void beneath the pretension. Brian Griffin is a dog who drinks wine. That detail matters more than it sounds like it does. The wine is not incidental. It is not a background prop or a running visual joke the show forgot to retire. It is a signal, one the show established early and has maintained across more than 20 seasons, that Brian is the kind of person who considers himself above his surroundings. He drinks wine because beer is what Peter drinks, and Brian has spent his entire life trying to be the opposite of Peter. He reads books, he writes novels that do not sell, he talks about politics at the dinner table, he corrects people. He is the smartest person in most rooms he enters, and he needs you to know that. And underneath all of it, he is a dog living in someone else's house without a real job or a finished manuscript or a single completed version of the life he keeps insisting he is capable of living. The wine is how he papers over the gap between who he believes he is and what he has actually managed to become. Season 3 of Family Guy opened on July 11, 2001, with an episode called The Thin White Line. It was the first episode to air after the show returned following its first cancellation, proving through a combination of DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns that the audience was still there even after Fox had given up on it. The writers knew they were getting another chance. The episode they chose to open with was a cocaine story about a dog who had run out of reasons to feel anything. Brian tells his therapist at the start of the episode that he is in an emotional rut. That phrase, emotional rut, is the calm, self-aware, therapy-ready language of someone who wants to appear to be dealing with something without actually dealing with it. His therapist suggests he may be too focused on himself and recommends he try volunteering. Brian takes the advice. He signs up to be a guide dog for a blind man. He sits in movie theaters describing what is happening on screen in a flat, bored tone. He tries other forms of volunteer work. Nothing sticks. Nothing gives him the feeling he is looking for, which is never quite named in the episode, but is recognizable anyway. The feeling that his life has weight. Then Joe Swanson gives him the opportunity to work as a drug-sniffing dog for the Quahog Police Department. Something clicks. Brian is genuinely good at it. On his first day working airport security, he tracks down a suitcase packed with cocaine. He finds it effortlessly, the way some people find things they were always meant to do. For a stretch of the episode, Brian looks like a man who has found his purpose. He comes home energized. He talks about the job with real enthusiasm, the kind that cuts through his usual layer of ironic distance. He is present in a way the show has not shown him being before, and then he snorts the cocaine. The show does not build to this moment dramatically. It happens the way most bad decisions happen in real life. Quickly, almost accidentally, with no music swelling and no character pausing to reflect on what they are about to do. Brian is at the airport. There is cocaine in front of him. He leans in. That is the entire sequence. What follows is one of the most specific depictions of stimulant behavior the show has produced. Brian comes home wound tight and talking fast, his sentences running over each other, his energy crammed into a body that cannot contain it. He sits at the dinner table and delivers a monologue about his day that begins with excitement and tips quickly into something else. He talks about a drug bust involving a man who hid cocaine inside his daughter's doll and his outrage about the ethics of this. His question about where the line is anymore is real and escalating and completely disconnected from the fact that Brian himself just snorted cocaine in an airport. The gap between what he is saying and what he is doing is the joke, but it is also the portrait. This is what addiction looks like in its early stage. Total inability to see yourself from the outside. His behavior deteriorates. He grows erratic. He shows up places high. The family notices. The show does not drag this out across multiple episodes or turn it into a slow burn. Brian's cocaine use, his family's concern, and his agreement to enter rehab all happen within a single episode, which is true to the show's format, but also accidentally true to how families often respond to addiction. All at once, in a rush, once the thing that was being ignored can no longer be ignored. The intervention scene is quiet. Brian cries. Stewie, never one to let an emotional moment pass without a joke, calls him a melancholy, a pun on melancholy and collie, a breed of dog. The room stays heavy. That is unusual for this show. Family Guy does not often let emotional weight sit without cutting away from it. The fact that it lets the intervention breathe suggests the writers knew they were doing something worth treating with some care. Brian goes to rehab. Peter, who was supposed to be on a family cruise before Brian's situation canceled the trip, fakes a drug addiction to stay at the facility instead. He wants the amenities. He treats the clinic like a resort. His presence is absurd, which is exactly the point. Peter has no idea what Brian is actually going through. His obliviousness is not malicious. It is just complete. Then the rehab doctor does something that changes everything. After watching Peter derail the facility's routines and drag Brian back into his orbit, the doctor announces that Peter is the X factor, the underlying cause of Brian's addiction. The theory is that Brian's emotional chaos, his lack of direction, his inability to settle into any version of his own life, can be traced to the destabilizing influence of living in the Griffin household and being Peter's closest companion. Brian rejects this so completely and so immediately that he checks himself out of rehab to prove it wrong. Read that again, slowly. Brian leaves the treatment program he voluntarily entered before completing it because a doctor suggested that his addiction might have an external cause. Brian cannot accept that explanation because accepting it would mean his problem is partly someone else's fault, and Brian's entire self-image is built on the idea that he is a self-determining, intelligent, autonomous individual who makes choices based on reason. If Peter made him an addict, then Brian is not in control of his own story. That is a more threatening idea to Brian than the cocaine was. So he leaves. He walks out. He tells the family that his time in rehab has shown him that everyone is responsible for their own destiny. He hails a cab. He goes to the airport. He flies somewhere. The family watches him go, too stunned to stop him, and the episode ends with a card reading, "To be continued." Brian does not get better at the end of the thin white line. He gets out. Those are different things, and the show knows they are different things, and it chooses to end the episode on that distinction, rather than give Brian or the audience the satisfaction of a clean resolution. The cocaine arc was never really about cocaine. The cocaine was the easiest part of the story. Brian found it, used it, got caught, agreed to get help, and left treatment early. That whole chain of events fits inside 22 minutes of television. What does not fit inside 22 minutes, what the show gestures at and then leaves unresolved, is the question of why Brian needed something to fill the void in the first place. His therapist told him at the start of the episode that he was too focused on himself. That is a gentle way of saying that Brian has built a life oriented entirely inward, where his own feelings and disappointments and frustrated ambitions take up so much space that there is no room for anything else. The volunteer work his therapist suggested was supposed to fix this. Connect with other people. Get out of your own head. Brian tried it. It did not work. Nothing worked until the cocaine, because the cocaine was the first thing that made him feel like his life had momentum without requiring him to actually build anything. This is a more honest thing for a cartoon to say about stimulant use than most serious dramas manage. The conventional addiction story is about a character who feels good on the substance and needs to learn that the good feeling is an illusion. Brian's story is about a character who feels purposeful on the substance, who feels for the first time in a long time like someone going somewhere. The loss is not the high. The loss is the direction. When Brian leaves rehab at the end of the episode, he is not cured. He is not even particularly different. He is just moving again, which is the closest thing to peace he knows how to find. He will carry the wine glass through the rest of the series. He will chase other things, other relationships, other schemes, and every one of them will be some version of the same search. He is always looking for the thing that makes the gap disappear, and nothing ever does. The cocaine was a solution to a problem the show never actually named. It just showed you the problem, let it breathe for 22 minutes, and sent Brian to the airport. The third section covers the season 5 episode called Peter's Two Dads and what it reveals about addiction displacement. Peter Griffin is not a man who does things halfway. When he eats until something breaks. When he fights a giant chicken across multiple episodes and multiple seasons for reasons neither he nor the chicken can fully remember. When he decides to fix a problem, he fixes it with the kind of total commitment that bypasses every reasonable middle step and lands directly on the most extreme available option. This is who Peter is. It is also, when you apply it to substance use, exactly the kind of thinking that turns one bad decision into a much worse one. Season 5, Episode 10, Peter's Two Dads, aired on February 11th, 2007. The episode begins at Meg's 17th birthday party, where Peter shows up dressed as a clown. What happens next is an accident. Peter does not intend to kill Francis Griffin, his deeply religious, deeply disapproving adoptive father. But Francis dies anyway, and the weight of that lands on Peter in a way the show does not immediately try to make funny. Francis was difficult. He was critical and cold and consistently made Peter feel small. He also raised Peter as his own son while knowing for years that Peter was not biologically his. The show holds both of those things at once. Peter blames the alcohol. This is the moment the episode pivots from a story about loss into something more specific. Peter watches his father die at a birthday party, and his brain finds a direct line between the beer in his hand and the man on the ground. The logic is not sound. The alcohol did not kill Francis. But grief does not run on sound logic, and Peter, in his pain, makes a decision with the full force of his personality behind it. He is never drinking again. He says it, and he means it completely in the way Peter always means things completely. Brian, who knows Peter better than almost anyone, does not celebrate this decision. He accepts it the way a person accepts news they already know will not end well. What happens next takes approximately one scene to unfold. Brian goes to check on Peter. He walks into the room expecting to find his friend in some state of grief-adjacent sobriety. What he finds instead is Peter on the floor, shirtless, wrapped around a couch cushion, completely out of his mind on crack cocaine. Peter looks up at Brian and screams that the government came and took his baby. Brian's response is one word, bleeped out on television, but everyone watching understands exactly what Brian says. And the reason it lands so hard is that it is not a comedy reaction, it is a genuine one. Peter's explanation, when it comes, is delivered with complete sincerity. He promised he would stop drinking. He did stop drinking. He is not drinking right now. Therefore, he is keeping his promise. The crack is beside the point because he specifically said no more drinking, and crack is not drinking. So, technically, he has not broken his word at all. This is the logic of a person whose relationship with a substance is so deeply wired into how they function that removing the substance does not create a clean space. It creates a vacuum that immediately needs to be filled with something else. Peter did not quit drinking because he examined his relationship with alcohol and decided he wanted a different life. He quit because he was in pain and needed something to blame for the pain, and alcohol was the closest available target. The quitting was not recovery, it was redirection. Brian says, in the moment he finds Peter on the floor, that crack is not a good substitute. The word substitute is doing important work there. It acknowledges, in a single word, that Peter was looking for a replacement rather than a change. The addiction did not stop when the drinking stopped. It found a new address. What the episode depicts, and depicts accurately even inside its comedic framing, is something that happens constantly in real patterns of substance use. A person gives up one thing and picks up another, often something worse, because the original problem was never about the specific substance. It was about the feeling the substance was providing. Peter drank because alcohol made being Peter easier. When he took the alcohol away without addressing any of that, the need did not disappear. It just looked around for the next available option. Crack cocaine is a significant jump from beer. That jump is intentional. The show is making the point as visibly as possible that the logic of substitution is not a safe logic, and that a person who tells themselves they are beating one habit by picking up another has not beaten anything at all. Then the story reveals that Peter's biological father is an Irish alcoholic named Mickey McFinnigan. The genetic line from Mickey McFinnigan to Peter Griffin is drawn in the same episode where Peter demonstrates that he cannot stop using substances even when he genuinely tries to. The show never says this out loud. It never states that your father was an addict and here you are unable to function without something in your system. But it puts those two facts in the same episode and trusts that the audience can see what is being drawn. Mickey McFinnigan, when Peter eventually meets him in Ireland, is exactly what the episode telegraphed he would be. He is large, loud, and drinks constantly. He is charming in the specific way of people who use charm as a survival tool. The episode resolves the paternity question with a drinking contest between Peter and Mickey. They drink against each other to determine whether Mickey is truly Peter's father, since the presumption is that Peter's real father would be able to keep up with him. The contest ends with both men barely conscious, the subtitles reduced to question marks because neither can form a coherent word anymore. The show frames this as the moment of connection between father and son. The thing that proves they are related is how much they can drink together. Think about what that means. The biological bond between Peter and his real father is confirmed not through a DNA test or an emotional conversation or any of the expected story beats, but through shared capacity for alcohol. Their relationship begins with drinking. In a show that also contains the sequence from Friends of Peter G., where alcohol is the thing that connected Peter to all his closest friends, this is consistent. Drinking in Peter's world is how connection happens. The crack cocaine scene does not come back up. After Brian registers his alarm and the episode moves toward the Mickey McFinnigan story, Peter's crack use is dropped entirely. The show does not explain how Peter went from shirtless on the floor to operating as a regular character again. This is the reset at work, the same pattern that runs through every addiction story in this show. The moment happens, the moment lands, the episode moves on. What stays, even after the reset, is the image. Peter on the floor, shirtless, clutching the cushion, screaming. Brian in the doorway, with a look that is not funny. The show deposited that image into its history, and it does not fully go away even after the episode ends and normal service resumes. The need is the actual problem. The beer was just the form it had taken. Remove the beer, and the need does not retire. It improvises. The fourth section covers Friends of Peter G. in Season 9, Episode 10, the only episode that tried to mean it. Family Guy has told a lot of addiction stories. Most of them are built the same way. A character picks up a substance, the substance causes problems, the problems are funny, the episode ends, and next week everything is back to normal. The show is honest enough about what it is doing that it rarely even pretends the reset will not happen. You watch the addiction episode, you laugh at the addiction episode, and you understand without being told that none of this will matter by the following Tuesday. Friends of Peter G. is different, not completely different. The reset still happens. The show still cannot fully commit to the weight of what it is depicting, but different enough that it stands apart from everything else in the show's run on this particular subject. It is the episode that tried hardest to mean something. And the fact that it tried, and the specific way it tried, and the exact moment where it pulled back from going all the way, tells you more about what Family Guy actually believes about addiction than any other 22 minutes of television the show has produced. The episode opens with Peter and Brian at a movie theater. They are drunk. They cause a disruption loud enough to become a legal matter, and a judge sentences them both to 30 days of Alcoholics Anonymous attendance. Not jail time, not community service in any traditional sense. 30 days of sitting in a room and listening to other people talk about their problems with alcohol. Peter and Brian treat this as an insult. Brian's argument against AA is delivered with the full confidence of someone who has thought the matter through carefully. He tells Lois that AA has not really helped people over the years. He says that people will simply become addicted to AA instead of alcohol. He presents this as a logical position. He is not embarrassed by it. He genuinely believes, or performs believing, that the problem with AA is that it asks people to give up drinking, and giving up drinking is an overreaction to what is really a very manageable situation. This is the show being precise about Brian in a way it does not always get credit for. Brian's argument against AA is not a joke the writers invented because it was funny. It is the exact argument a person makes when they are intelligent enough to construct a defense of their own behavior, but not honest enough to examine what they are defending. By the second meeting, Peter and Brian have brought several cases of beer and are encouraging the recovering alcoholics in the room to drink with them. Everyone does. The meeting, which was supposed to be a space where people help each other stay away from the thing that has hurt them, becomes a party. Joe shows up to investigate the noise. What follows is one of the most discussed sequences in the episode. Peter leads the group in a performance of a song called Mr. Booze, originally written by Sammy Cahn and Jimmy Van Heusen, and performed in the 1964 film Robin and the Seven Hoods. The song warns about what drinking does to a person. It describes how lives are ruined. On paper, it is exactly the kind of message the episode is supposed to be delivering. But the show performs it inside a scene where the people singing it have just been talked back into drinking by the two main characters, which means the anti-alcohol message is being sung by a room full of relapsing alcoholics as a cover story to fool a police officer. The irony is thick, and the show is aware of it. But the result is that a genuinely moving piece of music gets turned into a punchline. And the punchline works, and everyone who watches it laughs, and the moral content of the song dissolves inside the comedy of the situation. This is the moment where Friends of Peter G reveals its limits. The show wants to say something true about drinking. It also wants the Mr. Booze performance to be funny. When it has to choose, it chooses funny. That choice matters. It shows you exactly how far the show is willing to go before it pulls back. Peter drives home drunk from the meeting. He falls asleep at the wheel. He crashes into a tree. He dies on impact. Death arrives. Death, in the world of Family Guy, is a recurring character, a friendly, slightly tired figure who appears when the show needs to handle mortality without actually committing to it. He gives Peter a second chance. Death shows Peter two visions. The first vision is Peter continuing to drink the way he has been drinking. He is not just a heavier drinker in this version. He is an abusive man who torments his family and gives them cigar burns. The episode uses this specific detail, not something vague and indefensible, but a specific act of physical cruelty. His house is falling apart around him. His family is afraid of him. There is no comedy in this sequence. The show plays it straight, and the straightness is jarring enough that it works. You believe, inside the world of the episode, that this is a real possible future for this particular man. Peter says he wishes he had never touched alcohol at all. Death shows him that version too. Sober Peter has a different voice, lighter and more careful. He drinks milk. He has different friends. He is at the Drunken Clam, but the people he is with are quiet and careful and proud of themselves for being there without drinking. Joe and Quagmire are still present in Quahog, still loud and messy, but sober. Peter looks at them the way a person looks at strangers making too much noise at a restaurant, with mild disapproval and no interest in getting closer. He does not know them. The friendship that exists in real life, the years of shared evenings and stupid adventures and genuine loyalty, does not exist in this version because it was built inside a shared relationship with alcohol. Take the alcohol out of the origin story, and the friendships do not form. Peter hates this version of himself even more than the abusive drunk version. Death's conclusion is that Peter does not need to give up drinking entirely. He needs to drink in moderation. The episode presents this as wisdom. Then the show undercuts it. Peter is resurrected. He agrees to try moderation. From that point on, every time he buys a six-pack, he throws 3 cans in the trash. The final scene is at a landfill where the seagulls have been drinking the discarded beer. They are stumbling around drunk. One of them mentions that the food in buckets labeled as fast food chicken is incredible. Another seagull informs him that he is eating another bird. The first seagull has a total breakdown. It is a good joke. And it is also the show doing exactly what it always does, taking the weight out of a moment that was starting to feel heavy, replacing it with something lighter, and sending the audience home in a better mood than the material probably earned. The episode's moral was genuinely delivered. Death was not joking. Peter was not performing his agreement. For approximately 30 seconds of television, Family Guy said something true about what heavy drinking costs a person and offered a real practical response that did not require the character to become someone else entirely. And then the seagulls got drunk and everyone laughed and the episode ended. What makes Friends of Peter G important is not that it solved anything. It did not. Peter's drinking in subsequent seasons does not reflect a man who absorbed the lesson death taught him. The moderation resolution lasted exactly as long as the episode did. But the episode matters because of what it was willing to show in that middle section: the abusive drunk vision, the specific detail of the cigar burns, the cold portrait of a man who has let one thing consume everything else he was. The show looked directly at the worst version of Peter's drinking and did not look away, which is more than it usually does. The fifth section covers the season 7 episode called 420, and Brian's marijuana arrest and the broken bargain at the center of it. Brian Griffin has a type when it comes to substances. It is not a type defined by what the substance does to his body. It is a type defined by what the substance does to his story about himself. The cocaine in season 3 made him feel purposeful. The wine he carries through every season makes him feel refined. The Adderall he takes in season 14 makes him feel productive. Every substance Brian has ever used has been recruited into the same ongoing project, which is the construction and maintenance of a version of Brian Griffin that is smarter, more capable, and more worthy of recognition than the one that actually exists day to day. Marijuana is different, or at least Brian thinks it is different. He does not use it to feel better about himself. He uses it the way some people use a long drive with no destination, as a way to turn the noise down. The ambition, the self-criticism, the constant awareness of the gap between where he is and where he thinks he should be. Marijuana for Brian is the one substance that does not ask anything of him. It does not make him feel like a genius. It just makes him feel like the pressure is off for a while. Season 7, Episode 12, titled 420, aired on April 19, 2009, one day before April 20th, which is the date associated with cannabis use in American culture. The episode drew 7.4 million viewers on its original airing. The episode begins with a chain of events involving Peter and Quagmire. Quagmire has adopted a stray cat named James, and his attachment to the animal has made him calmer, more focused on home life, less available for evenings at the Drunken Clam. Peter finds this irritating. While Quagmire is out buying the cat a birthday present, the group decides to shave the animal as a prank. The prank goes wrong. Peter kills the cat with the razor. Peter and Brian take the body to the woods to dispose of it. They are pulled over by police on the way. The officers find the dead cat, note it calmly, and move on. Then they find marijuana in the car and arrest Brian immediately. The joke is in the contrast. A dead animal barely registers, but marijuana results in instant handcuffs. And the joke is making a real point about how drug laws are enforced and what they prioritize. This is the kind of thing Family Guy does when it is working at its best, hiding a legitimate argument inside a laugh. Brian is bailed out by the family. He is put on probation. Joe arrives shortly afterward to conduct a drug test, which is part of his probation conditions. Brian has been smoking marijuana since getting home. He asks Stewie to provide a urine sample so he can pass the test without stopping. Lois catches him in the middle of this. She tells him that if he is willing to go to these lengths just to keep smoking, then something needs to change. Brian's response is not to quit. His response is to launch a campaign to make marijuana legal. This is the move the episode is built around, and it is a very Brian move. Faced with a rule he does not agree with, Brian does not quietly work around it or accept it as the cost of his choices. He decides the rule is wrong and that his personal situation is actually a political issue. There is genuine logic to this. Many of Brian's arguments for legalization in the episode are accurate and coherent, but there is also a significant amount of Brian using political conviction as a shield for personal convenience. Brian and Stewie collaborate on a public musical number called A Bag of Weed, performed to the tune of a song from the 1964 film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. The number is enthusiastic, choreographed, and unambiguously in favor of marijuana. The song works. The entire town rallies behind them. Mayor Adam West legalizes marijuana in Quahog. Almost everyone starts smoking it. Brian reports that crime is down, productivity is up, and even Peter cannot set up one of his trademark cutaway gags because he is too stoned to think of one. This is the moment where the episode runs into a problem it created for itself. The network's censors did not want marijuana presented purely in a positive light, which is why the legalization scenes also include depictions of people becoming unable to function properly. Tom Tucker and Diane Simmons, the local news anchors, can barely form sentences on air. So the episode is simultaneously arguing two things at once. Brian says the town has improved. The animation shows people who cannot do their jobs. The words say one thing, the pictures say another. Then Carter Pewterschmidt, Lois's enormously wealthy father, gets involved. He is losing money. Now that marijuana is legal and hemp can be used to make paper and other products, his timber business is suffering. Carter approaches Peter and offers him money to make anti-marijuana videos that will turn public opinion back against legalization. Peter agrees. The anti-marijuana campaign does not work. Lois identifies exactly why. Brian only succeeded because he genuinely believed what he was saying. The passion was real. Peter's paid advocacy has no conviction behind it. Carter takes this information and uses it. He goes to Brian directly with a specific offer. He will publish Brian's novel, the book Brian has been trying to get released for years, the one that represents his entire sense of himself as a legitimate writer. He will put an Oprah's Book Club sticker on it, which would guarantee enormous sales and serious literary attention. All Brian has to do is use his credibility to argue against marijuana legalization, to take the cause he just fought for and publicly reverse it. Brian takes the deal. He performs a new musical number arguing against marijuana with the same energy and apparent conviction he brought to the pro-legalization song. The town reverses. Marijuana is made illegal again. Brian's novel is published with 2 million copies printed. Not a single copy sells. Every critic in the country pans it. Tom Tucker reports that Brian's book has set a record as the worst-selling novel ever published. Stewie builds a fort in the living room out of the unsold books and calls it a house made of mediocrity. The episode does not editorialize about this. It does not have another character tell Brian what he did was wrong. It just shows you the outcome and lets that sit. Because the episode is not really about marijuana. It is about the specific way Brian Griffin is addicted to the idea of being recognized as talented. The marijuana is the surface. Underneath the marijuana is the novel. Underneath the novel is Brian's need for someone with authority to tell him that he is worth taking seriously. Carter offered him that, wrapped in an Oprah sticker, and Brian took it immediately, without apparent hesitation, even though it meant reversing everything he had just publicly fought for. This is a more uncomfortable kind of addiction than cocaine or alcohol or prescription pills, because it does not look like addiction from the outside. Brian did not lose control. He made a rational calculation. He weighed what he wanted against what was being offered and chose what he wanted. The problem is what he wanted, which was external confirmation of his own talent, and how completely that need overrode everything else he claimed to value. High Times magazine named Brian Griffin its Stoner of the Year for 2009 as a direct result of this episode. He was the first animated character to receive the award. The Venezuelan government reacted to the episode by banning Family Guy from local networks, with the Justice Minister stating that the show promoted cannabis use. The Parents Television Council, which had been criticizing Family Guy since its premiere and had named it their worst show of the week more than 40 times, targeted a rerun of the episode specifically because of its focus on marijuana legalization. All of them treated the episode as though it had a single clear position. None of them were looking at the part that matters most, which is what happens after the song ends and the deal is made and the books sit unsold in Stewie's fort. The episode's real argument is not about marijuana at all. It is about what Brian is willing to do when the right thing is dangled in front of him, and how quickly the answer turns out to be almost anything. The sixth section covers the season 14 premiere, called Pilling Them Softly, and what it reveals about prescription drugs and the creativity lie. Brian Griffin has wanted one thing his entire life: not love, though he pursues that; not alcohol, though he reaches for that constantly; not marijuana, though he went to war for his right to it. The one thing Brian has wanted from the first season to the last is for someone with real authority and real credibility to look at something he created and tell him it is good. That is the engine underneath everything else. The drinking, the failed relationships, the political opinions delivered at dinner tables where nobody asked, all of it is the behavior of a person trying to convince the world that he is worth taking seriously because he is not yet fully convinced himself. Season 14, Episode 1, Pilling Them Softly, aired on September 27, 2015. It was the 250th episode of Family Guy overall. Seth MacFarlane won the Outstanding Character Voiceover Performance Emmy for his work in this episode specifically. The episode begins with Stewie at preschool. His teacher pulls Lois aside and tells her that Stewie has been having trouble paying attention in class. The teacher reads from a manual and recommends medication. There is no extended evaluation, no second opinion sought, no real pause to consider whether a child who is already speaking in complete sentences and building elaborate devices in his bedroom might simply be bored. Stewie leaves the doctor's office with ADHD medication. He comes home and takes the pill. Brian goes to check on him and finds Stewie lying on a mountain of pillows and stuffed animals, completely still, eyes open and glassy, moving at approximately 1/10 of his normal speed. Stewie calls it his pillow world. The sharp, fast, dangerous version of Stewie has been chemically replaced by something that will take a nap without complaint and cause no problems in a classroom. Brian is immediately and vocally against this. He argues that Stewie is too young for prescription pills, that the solution to a child not paying attention should not be a chemical one, that something is wrong with a system that moves this fast from complaint to prescription. His position is reasonable, and he holds it with real conviction. Then Meg mentions casually that the medication makes you more productive. Brian stops talking. Something shifts behind his eyes. He goes quiet in a way that is different from his usual quiet. He takes one of Stewie's pills. The change is immediate and total. Brian goes from his usual pace, thoughtful, deliberate, slightly self-satisfied, to something that looks like a completely different character. His eyes go red. His speech accelerates. He cannot stop moving. He starts a project and then expands it, and then expands it again, each addition generating 3 more, until the project has consumed the entire basement of the Griffin house. What he builds is called Spaceshare 7. It is a complete science fantasy universe with its own rules, its own history, its own characters, its own languages. He writes a 2,000-page treatment for it. He constructs a full physical model of the world in the basement, a detailed landscape with buildings and figures and geography laid out across the floor. From the outside, it looks like creativity. From inside Brian's head, it feels like creativity. The medication has removed whatever internal resistance usually sits between his ideas and his output. He is producing at a rate he has never produced before. The novel he could not finish, the screenplay that went nowhere, the years of sitting with a half-empty page, all of that feels like it belongs to a different person. This version of Brian does not get stuck. He decides to take Spaceshire 7 directly to the person most qualified to evaluate it. George R.R. Martin is at a book convention in Hartford, Connecticut. He is one of the most successful fantasy writers alive, best known for the series that became the television program Game of Thrones. Brian and Stewie travel to Hartford. Brian gets in front of Martin and delivers what he clearly believes is a compelling, detailed, and original creative vision. Martin listens. Then he responds. He tells Brian that he knows Brian was on drugs when he wrote it. He says the drugs did not make Brian write well. They made Brian write a lot. These are two different things, and Martin is not gentle about the distinction. That single sentence is the center of the entire episode. Everything else, the preschool meeting, Stewie's pillow world, the basement construction, the trip to Hartford, is built around delivering that one observation to Brian Griffin at the exact moment when he is least prepared to receive it. Because Brian thought it was the same thing. He thought that the sensation of writing without resistance, of producing page after page without getting stuck, meant that what he was producing was good. The medication gave him a feeling he had never had before, the feeling of being a working, functioning, completing writer. And he confused that feeling with the actual achievement of writing something worth reading. The feeling was real. The quality was not there. This is what makes the episode such a specific and honest addiction story. It is not about a substance that makes you feel good. It is about a substance that makes you feel capable, and the terrible thing that happens when you discover that feeling capable and actually being capable are not the same. Brian has spent his entire life believing his problem is output. If he could just produce more, finish more, get more words on the page, the quality would follow. The Adderall seemed to solve the output problem completely. And George R.R. Martin, who has read enough writing to know the difference between volume and quality from the first paragraph, looked at what Brian produced and saw exactly what it was. A lot of words. No good ones. Brian and Stewie leave the convention and agree that they no longer need the pills. They go home. The Adderall storyline ends cleanly, as these things do in Family Guy, without the kind of extended withdrawal or rebuilding period that would follow in a more realistic story. But the Martin conversation does not go away as easily as the pills do. What Martin said to Brian in Hartford is the harshest possible version of something Brian already knows and refuses to fully face. Brian is not a writer who has not yet produced anything good because he lacks effort or time or access to tools. He is that writer because the ideas he believes are original are not as original as he believes, and the voice he thinks is distinctive is not as distinctive as he needs it to be. And no substance on earth can manufacture those things from scratch. The cocaine in season 3 filled an empty space and gave him momentum. The marijuana gives him rest from his own ambition. The Adderall gave him the sensation of genius. Every substance Brian uses is a different attempt to feel like the writer he tells himself he is. None of them produce the writing. They produce the feeling of writing, which is close enough to fool him for as long as the substance is active. The writers knew what they were doing. They built the Adderall story specifically so that the truth could be delivered by someone Brian could not dismiss at a moment when Brian had eliminated every excuse. The drugs revealed what was already true. They just made it impossible to look away from. The 7th section covers the season 20 episode called Prescription Heroin and Lois Griffin and the Painkiller Crisis. Lois Griffin runs the house on Spooner Street. The house contains Peter, who causes damage at a rate that would exhaust most people inside a week. It contains Stewie, who is planning things that would frighten a military general. It contains Chris, who needs more patience than he usually receives. It contains Meg, who needs more of everything than she usually receives. It contains Brian, who drinks too much and finishes too little and takes up emotional space with his problems. And it contains Lois herself, who manages all of this every day with a level of consistency that the show acknowledges mostly by showing you what happens when it is briefly removed. Lois is not a saint. The show has never tried to make her one. She has her own selfishness and her own blind spots, but she is structurally the person the Griffin household depends on to remain upright. When she is functioning, the house functions. When she stops functioning, everything else stops too. Season 20, Episode 16, Prescription Heroin, aired on March 27, 2022. The title is a deliberate double meaning. Heroin as in a female hero, and heroin as in the drug. The episode uses both meanings intentionally. The setup is simple. Brian breaks his arm. The veterinarian gives him prescription painkillers to manage the pain. Lois gets into the pills. The show does not spend much time explaining how this happens because it does not need to. The opioid crisis in America had been a documented public health emergency for years by the time this episode aired. One of the most established facts about that crisis is how ordinary the beginning of it looks. A prescription exists. The pills are in the house. Someone in pain, not necessarily physical pain, but the accumulated weight of a life that asks a great deal of them every single day, finds the pills and discovers that they make the weight feel lighter for a while. Lois's addiction escalates quickly. The episode does not show a gradual slide. It shows someone who finds something that works and immediately needs more of it, which is how opioid addiction behaves in real life. The most disturbing scene in the episode involves Stewie. Lois drops a pill in the bathroom. It falls into the toilet. She cannot reach it. Her need for the pill is strong enough that she picks up Stewie, holds him upside down over the toilet bowl, and forces his head into the water to fish the pill out. She is using her infant son as a tool to retrieve a drug. Stewie cannot stop her. Brian walks in and saves Stewie before anything worse happens. This scene is not played as a gentle joke. The image of a mother holding her baby headfirst into a toilet because she needs what is at the bottom of it is not treated as broadly funny in the way the show treats most physical comedy. It is staged to be uncomfortable. The show wants you to feel the wrongness of it. Brian's response to discovering what Lois has become is worth examining closely. Brian has had a well-established and frequently referenced attraction to Lois across more than 20 seasons of Family Guy. When Lois is at her lowest, dependent, and compromised, and willing to do things she would never do in her right mind, Brian does not take advantage of the situation. He does not use her vulnerability to position himself as her rescuer in a way that serves his own interests. He helps her get sober. The episode specifically acknowledges this as notable behavior for his character. His method is not gentle. Brian tricks Lois into entering his dog crate by telling her there is one last pill in there. She goes in. He locks the crate. He is going to keep her confined until the addiction loosens its grip on her, a decision the show presents as tough love, hard on both of them, but the only available option given how far gone she already is. Lois, locked in the crate, turns to Stewie for help. She asks him to open the door and let her out. Stewie ignores her completely. The reason is not stated out loud, but it does not need to be. Stewie was the one held headfirst into a toilet. Whatever sympathy he might have extended has already been used up. The reversal is pointed. The show has a long history of Stewie desperately trying to get Lois's attention and being ignored. Now Lois is the one calling for help and being met with silence. The title of the episode carries the full weight of what the show is pointing at: prescription heroin. The heroin meaning describes Lois in her normal state, the person who holds things together and keeps the household functional through sheer consistency. The heroin meaning describes what the prescription became for her. The episode is asking you to hold both meanings at once. The episode ends with Lois getting through the withdrawal period inside Brian's crate and returning to something like herself. But the final beat does something unusual. The implication is left hanging that Lois is already looking for other ways to feel what the pills made her feel. The addiction is not described as over. The specific substance is gone. The need it was filling is not. This ending is more honest than most addiction conclusions Family Guy has offered. Brian's cocaine story ended with him leaving for the airport. Peter's drinking story ended with seagulls getting drunk on discarded beer. Those endings cushion the moment with humor or movement. Prescription Heroin ends with a quiet suggestion that Lois is not finished, that the thing the pills addressed has not gone away, that what the audience is seeing is a pause rather than a resolution. Lois's addiction story sits differently from Brian's or Peter's because of what she represents in the show's structure. Peter's drinking is his identity. Brian's substance use is his ongoing attempt to close the gap between his self-image and his reality. But Lois's opioid use is about exhaustion. She is the person everyone else leans on, and the pills were the first thing she found that let her put the weight down. The 8th section covers the season's 16 episode called Crimes and Meg's Demeanor and the Conversation on the Boat. Meg Griffin does not get a lot of wins. This is not an accident or an oversight on the part of the writers. It is a deliberate and long-running feature of how Family Guy uses Meg. She is the family member everyone overlooks, the one who gets the least and asks for the most and receives the worst version of whatever the episode is offering that week. The show has built her unpopularity into her character so completely that by season 16, it is less a character trait and more a law of the universe she inhabits. Season 16, Episode 8, aired on December 3, 2017. The episode title is a reference to the Woody Allen film Crimes and Misdemeanors. Peter wants to watch television. Lois is home. The kids are home. The living room is occupied. Peter, operating with his characteristic approach to parenting, which is to find the path that solves his immediate problem with the least possible involvement on his part, tells Meg to go out and have fun. He wants her gone so he can have the couch. This is the entire reason Meg ends up at the party. Not because she was invited, not because she sought it out, but because her father wanted to watch television. She goes. She tries to talk to people. The conversations do not go well, which is consistent with Meg's experience of social situations. She is standing at the edge of things, which is where she usually stands, when she notices the bar set up at the party and starts drinking. Something unexpected happens. She gets funny. Not funny in a desperate, trying too hard way. Actually funny. She starts making jokes, including a crack about a group of slightly overweight students who formed an a cappella group, suggesting they call themselves the Trans Fats. The joke lands. People laugh. Meg, who spends most of her life invisible or mocked, suddenly has a room's attention in a way that feels genuinely good rather than humiliating. The show is making a specific and honest observation here. For a person who has never had easy access to social confidence, alcohol does not just lower their guard. It temporarily removes the weight of every bad social experience they have accumulated. Meg is not drunk in the sloppy, falling over way the show usually presents intoxication. She is loosened. She is present in a way she rarely gets to be. She brings the drinking home. Lois notices immediately. She finds a Taco Bell bag in Meg's room and confronts Peter about it, pointing out that he sent Meg to the party in the first place. She tells him he needs to fix it. Lois also says something that stops the scene cold for a moment. She tells Meg, when she first catches her, that alcoholism runs in the family. 5 words. The show does not expand on them. No character asks which family members or how far back it goes. Lois says it, and the scene moves forward, and nobody brings it up again. But those 5 words are doing something important. They are the show acknowledging in plain language what it has been depicting since season 1. The Griffin family has a documented multi-generational pattern of substance use. Peter's attempt to talk to Meg about drinking leads them, with no apparent awareness of the irony, directly to the drunken clam. Peter sits his daughter down at a bar to explain why she should be careful about drinking. They have the conversation. Then they start drinking together. Then they drink more. Then, at some point during the night, in a state of complete blackout, they board a boat docked nearby, cast off from the dock, and sail away from Quahog into open water. They wake up the next morning, adrift at sea. Both of them are experiencing the first hours of what a serious night of drinking costs you the next day. Peter, who has been through this many times, is more or less functional inside it. Meg, for whom this is a new experience, is in genuine physical distress. Eventually, they are rescued. But before they get off the boat, something happens that makes this episode genuinely different from everything around it. Peter talks to Meg honestly, not in a speech, not in the kind of neatly packaged lesson that a public service announcement would deliver. He talks to her the way a person talks when they are hungover and uncomfortable and too tired to manage their words carefully. He tells her he does not want her drinking because he does not want her wasting the good parts of her life being too drunk or too sick to use them. He tells her she has a good head on her shoulders. He admits that he pushed her toward the party because he wanted the couch to himself. Then he tells her something that is the closest Peter Griffin has ever come to understanding his own relationship with alcohol. He tells her she does not need it, that the version of herself she found at the party, the one who could hold a room and make people laugh and be present and confident and noticed, is already in her without the drinking. The alcohol did not create that Meg. It just let her find her for an evening. Peter knows this because he knows the opposite is true for him. The version of Peter that exists without alcohol, the one death showed him in season 9, the milk-drinking stranger who does not know his own friends, is genuinely lesser. Peter needs what the drinking gives him in a way that Meg, at 17, at the very beginning of her relationship with alcohol, does not yet need it. He can see the difference between his situation and hers. He cannot fix his own situation, but he can, in this moment, make sure she does not arrive at the same place he did. Meg accepts what he says. She agrees to stop. The conversation on the boat is one of the most genuinely affecting things the show has ever produced in the context of its addiction storylines. And the reason it works is that it is not built from dramatic music or a long, tearful speech. It is built from Peter Griffin, hungover and adrift at sea, too tired to perform anything, saying true things to his daughter in plain language. Peter sees Meg clearly in that moment in a way he rarely does. He sees that she is capable, that the confidence she found at the party is real and belongs to her. And he sees that she is at a fork in the road where the direction she chooses now will have consequences he recognizes because he is living them. He cannot go back and take the other fork himself, but he can point at it for her. Lois said alcoholism runs in the family. Peter, without using that language, showed Meg exactly what it looks like to be standing at the place where the running starts. And then he told her, as clearly as he knew how, that she did not have to run. It is the most responsible thing Peter Griffin does in 16 seasons of television. It happened on a boat at sea while he was hungover. It lasted about 2 minutes. And the show moved on the next week as if it had not happened. But it happened. The 9th section covers the cutaway gag as an addiction delivery system and how Family Guy normalizes substance use through its own structure. There is a technique Family Guy uses more than any other show on television. It is the cutaway gag. A character says something or a situation calls for a reference, and the show cuts away from the main story to show a completely separate scene, sometimes 3 seconds long, sometimes 30, before cutting back to wherever the story was. The cutaway is Family Guy's signature. It is the thing critics point to when they criticize the show and the thing fans point to when they defend it. It is the engine the show runs on. It is also the specific mechanism through which Family Guy has spent more than 20 years treating addiction as entertainment without ever fully treating it as a consequence. To understand how this works, you have to understand what a cutaway actually does to the story around it. When Family Guy cuts away from A